The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When the days for Jesus being taken up were fulfilled, he resolutely determined to journey to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him. On the way, they entered a Samaritan village to prepare for his reception there, but they would not welcome him, because the destination of his journey was Jerusalem. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" Jesus turned and rebuked them, and they journeyed to another village. As they were proceeding on their journey, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus answered him, "Foxes have dens and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head." And to another he said, "Follow me." But he replied, "Lord, let me go first and bury my father." But he answered him, "Let the dead bury their dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God." And another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but first let me say farewell to my family at home." To him Jesus said, "No one who sets a hand to the plow and looks to what was left behind is fit for the kingdom of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
My grandfather emigrated from Ireland to America in 1920. He got on a boat. He crossed the Atlantic. He never went back home. Seeing as how he died more than 60 years ago, he certainly never Skyped or emailed his family back there. To my knowledge, he didn't even call at a time when transatlantic telephone calls were difficult. There was only an occasional letter. He never spoke to his mother, his father, his siblings, and his friends in County Clare again. Hard to imagine in this day and age when we can leave our homes behind and yet still be in contact with people in Inner Mongolia. Father Soren, who founded this place some decades before, got on a boat in France with 6 brothers, crossed the Atlantic, made his way to Indiana, barely knew any English. But by the time he got here, he had so thoroughly embraced America and his destiny and his call to be a priest in this country that from all of his actions as they've been recorded in our chronicles, he might as well have been born on the Mayflower and on the way over and been part of one of America's founding families. This was the place to which he felt that God had called him to serve. And he never looked back. It's hard for us, I think, to imagine doing something similar, not just because of the technology, but because we are trained to think about maximizing our options. Somebody graduating from high school is going to apply to 14 or 15 colleges and see what the best one is that he or she can gain entrance to and what kind of financial aid packages they can get, looking forward to their future career. Students who come here are thinking about how they can take on second or third majors and acquire languages and go overseas and build resumes for graduate school, medical school, or employment beyond. And it is natural to do this. And we learn some things about ourselves along the way. And by doing those things, we may find out what our own vocations are. But there is a greater, overwhelming principle that we need to keep in mind about how all of these things that we do are meant in some way to give witness to the Spirit and power of God in our lives, and how everything that we do is called to be a reflection of the love that He has for us. But it's hard still. Hard to reach back into distant times and imagine Elisha, prosperous on his farm, going and following Elijah simply because this prophet came up and threw a blanket over his head and told him that he had been called, slaughtering his oxen in the field, letting his farm go fallow, giving up everything that he had spent his life working for, and put blind trust in Elijah. It's hard for us to imagine more contemporary examples. It's been a few years now, but someone like Pat Tillman gave up a promising NFL career, left behind his family and friends because he felt compelled to fight in Afghanistan, and even harder to comprehend the tragedy of why he had to die there. And yet there are people all the time, in every age, who are willing to give up everything to leave behind those things that they love most for a cause that seems greater, to leave behind everything in order to follow God. I imagine that it's easier for us to identify with the people who are portrayed in this gospel, who ask to bury their fathers first, to say goodbye to their families. It seems perhaps almost harsh and cruel on Jesus' part to say the words that he does, that anyone who looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God. And yet we also know, being human, how easy it is to make up excuses for delaying our turning to the Father. I don't have the time. I have something else I have to do. I have responsibilities. I'm too young. I'm too old. There is always something with the potential to hold us back from giving everything over to God and letting all the other pieces and decisions that we have to make fall into place. We can identify with these people in the gospel. We can identify with the people a few chapters later who are called to the wedding banquet and make up excuses. We can identify with the story of the rich young man who just couldn't give up his possessions in order to follow Jesus Christ, even though he knew him to be the Son of God. It is all too easy for us to understand because we've been there. We've done that. We've delayed. We've rationalized. We've turned away. And yet we know the essential truth of this gospel, that for us, each of us uniquely created by God, there is one thing out there, one thing worth living for, one thing worth dying for, one thing we have been called to do, and it is that thing that leads us back to the Father, to whom we are called to be reunited who is asking us to look into our hearts and see how it is that we might serve him and put our talents to best use, which is the vocation that each of us has, to live in this world, citizens of this world, yearning for the next.